세계라 부르자. 흔히 4차원이라고 말하는 분할된 우주. 경험이 의미로 환원되지 않고 위치를 설정할 때마다 사이 공간으로 미끄러지는 삶. 안 그래도 허리 디스크가 작년에 와서 그것 때문에 좀 고생을 많이 했고 지금은 조금 많이 나아졌어요. 그 모션 데스크라는 책상이 있는데 다들 아시는지 모르겠어요. 버튼 누르면 자동으로 이렇게 올라가는 그런 책상을 요즘 팔더라고요. 그래서 거금을 써서 모션 데스크도 사고, 그리고 이제 저는 사실은 평생 운동을 거의 안 하던 사람인데 운동을 하고 있습니다. 근데 계속 시작만 하고 있어요. 왜냐하면 지속을 못하기 때문에. 모든 것은 영원했다의 여러 가지 주제가 있는데 여기서 그 좀 흥미로운 점 중에 하나가 이 정 웰링턴이라는 인물이 가지고 있는 정체성인 것 같아요. 한국에서 이제 독립운동을 했었던 독립운동 집안의 자식이지만 미국에서 태어난 미국인이었었고, 근데 미국인인데 또 본인의 어떤 정치적 믿음은 공산주의, 사회와 여러 가지 정치적인 요소들 때문에 이 사람을 괴롭혔던 이데올로기들이 존재를 했었는데, 그러한 교차들이 우리들에게, 지금 시대를 사는 우리에게 되게 많은 것들을 던져준다고 생각을 하거든요. 지금 저희는 굉장히 자유로운 시대인 것 같고, 또 그 어느 때보다 차별이나 혐오 같은 문제가 대두되기도 하고 있잖아요. 많이 마주치는 만큼 분명히 우리 안에 있는 편견이나 고정관념들이 작동할 수밖에 없는 거죠. 근데 20세기에 이미 그런 삶을 살았던 정 웰링턴을 보면서 지금 시대에 대한 어떤 여러 가지 우리가 반성해야 될 것들을 사유할 수 있지 않나, 그런 생각을 합니다. 제가 소설에만 국한되지 않고 여러 작업을 하고, 그리고 그런 여러 작업들이 저에게 또 즐거움도 되고 영감을 주기도 하거든요. 그래서 지금 제가 앞두고 있는 책 중에 하나가 금정현이라는 그 평론가가 있는데 그분하고 같이 영화에 관한 책을 썼어요. 그 영화에 관한 책은 한국영상자료원 홈페이지에서 연재를 했었던 칼럼을 모은 책이고, 영화에 대한 책이지만 사실상은 영화에 대한 책은 아닌, 그럼 무엇에 대한 책인가 하면 무의미한 것에 대해서 되게 박식하게 이야기를 하고 있는 책이라고도 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 결국은 그 말인즉슨 다시 거꾸로 말하면 무의미한 것은 사실 없다는 얘기인 것 같아요. 그래서 아무튼 그런 여러 가지 다양한 작업들 공부를 하고 있습니다.
In our headlines on this Monday, July 7th, here in South Korea. The Trump administration is reportedly looking to send letters to its trade partners starting today, unilaterally notifying them of their respective tariffs if related negotiations have failed to bear fruit. Meanwhile, the July extraordinary session of the National Assembly begins today, with lawmakers across the aisle divided but aware of the need for cooperation over confrontation. Over in the U.S. in recent days, torrential rains in the state of Texas caused tragic floods that have taken at least 80 lives, including those of children at a summer camp. The Trump administration is poised to dispatch letters to U.S. trade partners starting Monday, unilaterally informing them of their respective tariffs if related negotiations have failed to bear fruit. Our Moon Ji-young starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced via Truth Social that the U.S. will start delivering tariff letters to other countries starting 12 noon Eastern Time on Monday. Currently, it is unknown which nations will be receiving the letter or have made deals. Earlier that day, Trump told reporters,
"Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. Could be 12, maybe 15. And they'll be going out on Monday, and some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made."
Trump added that either a letter will be sent or a deal will be done by July 9th. Following Trump's comments, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick indicated a 3-week reprieve.
Tariffs go into effect August 1st, but the president is setting the rates and the deals right now.
Great.
This comes after Trump's announcement of the tariff in April, which included a 10% base rate for most countries and additional rates, which in some cases went up to around 50%, although he later delayed the effective date for all but the 10% tariff until July 9th. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak is in Washington, D.C. for 3 days to discuss pending issues. On his way to the U.S. on Sunday, he told reporters that Seoul and Washington have been discussing issues related to trade and security.
As the current negotiation phase is becoming quite critical, I'm stepping up my involvement, which is why I'm visiting the United States.
He is expected to meet with his U.S. counterpart, Marco Rubio. When asked about defense cost sharing, he indicated that a range of issues were open for discussion, implying that cost sharing could be on the agenda. The agenda is also expected to include coordination for a summit between President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
And South Korea has reportedly asked to be excluded from U.S. plans to impose fees on foreign-built car carriers docking at American ports. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, South Korea's Ministries of Trade and Oceans submitted a request to this end last week. Now, back in April, the Trump administration announced plans for the new port fees on vessels, particularly those built or operated by Chinese entities, to address concerns over China's dominance in the global shipping arena. At the National Assembly, ruling opposition lawmakers remain poles apart over several legislative initiatives, but they are now reportedly seeing eye to eye on the need for cooperation over confrontation. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
The July extraordinary session of the National Assembly kicked off on Monday, with the ruling and opposition parties entering the term sharply divided following last week's passage of the highly contentious extra budget bill. The ruling Democratic Party is pushing to pass a number of bills that were previously vetoed by the former administration, including broadcasting reform legislation and a revision to the Trade Union and Labor Relations Adjustment Act, known as the Yellow Envelope Bill. The broadcasting bills aim to reduce political influence over public broadcasters by limiting the number of board members appointed by political parties, while the Yellow Envelope Bill seeks to broaden the definition of employer and restrict damage claims against labor unions. Efforts to reform the prosecution are also picking up pace.
We promise to swiftly implement the complete separation of investigation and indictment, ensure effective checks on prosecutorial power, and institutionalize political neutrality.
Meanwhile, the opposition People Power Party is continuing its efforts to counter the DP's legislative dominance. PPP floor leaders Hong Won-seok declared that the party would use upcoming confirmation hearings for ministerial nominees as an opportunity to push back against what the party sees as unilateral rule.
The People Power Party, together with the people, will examine the qualifications and moral integrity of ministerial nominees riddled with criminal suspicions on a microscopic level in order to block the arrogant and one-sided governance of the Lee Jae-myung administration.
Although ministerial nominees do not require a parliamentary vote for appointment, confirmation hearings serve as a key opportunity for the opposition party to vet and challenge the president's personnel decisions. Despite this heightened tension, both parties are making cautious moves towards cooperation. On the first day of the session, the policy chiefs of both parties formed a joint consultative body aimed at fast-tracking livelihood-related bills and coordinating shared campaign pledges made during the recent presidential election. Both sides acknowledged their differences on key policy matters but agreed on the need for discussion, not confrontation. As the session continues, the coming weeks will test whether bipartisan dialogue can truly take root. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Also, on the political front, Prime Minister Kim In-seok hosted a meeting between government officials and ruling party lawmakers at his residence this past weekend to address rising consumer prices and the timing of the recently approved supplementary budget. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young covers that meeting.
As consumer prices in South Korea rose 2.2% on-year in June, the fastest increase in 5 months, the government and ruling Democratic Party agreed to review measures to stabilize prices, including efforts to minimize processed food price hikes. This came during the first high-level consultation meeting between government officials and the ruling party under the Lee Jae-myung administration. At the meeting held on Sunday at Prime Minister Kim Min-seok's residence, Kim urged the government and the DP to work as one and do their best to serve the country and its people.
The high-level consultation between the government and the ruling party will function as a platform to coordinate key policy tasks and produce tangible outcomes under the president's leadership.
The DP called on the government to quickly implement a supplementary budget for economic recovery. The cabinet on Saturday approved an extra budget bill worth 31.8 trillion Korean won, or around $23.3 billion US.
To help boost spending and support incomes, consumption vouchers should be rolled out before the peak summer vacation season. We once again request swift implementation of the extra budget.
In response, the government said it plans to execute 85% of the budget by the end of September and work with related ministries to closely monitor its impact. Meanwhile, safety measures for potential disasters during the summer season were also part of discussions. The government promised to take thorough steps to prepare for natural disasters like floods and storms, and both sides agreed to strengthen their response to heat waves. They also agreed to communicate more closely and hold regular high-level consultation meetings. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's potential growth rate for this year is predicted to stand at 1.9%. Now, this is according to the OECD, and it's the lowest prediction since 2001 and the first time that the figure has fallen below 2%. Also, this rate has been steadily retreating since 2011. The potential growth rate refers to the highest sustainable growth of an economy without sparking inflation, under the assumption that all aspects of production, like capital and labor, are in operation. The Lee Jae-myung administration has pledged to bolster South Korea's potential growth rate back to 3%. In the U.S., torrential rains in the state of Texas caused tragic floods that have taken at least 80 lives, including those of children at a summer camp. Our Pyun Ye-young reports.
Catastrophic floods rushed through central Texas on Friday and have left at least 82 dead. The death toll climbed over the Independence Day weekend as emergency crews carried out search and rescue efforts. Kerrville County was hit the hardest, with 40 adults and 28 children confirmed dead. Among those affected are children from Camp Mystics, an all-girls summer camp where 10 children still remain missing.
And it was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through. And we will remain 100% dedicated, searching for every single one of the children who were at Camp Mystic, as well as anybody else in the entire riverbed.
Efforts continue to recover bodies and find additional survivors. Volunteers have joined the mission and formed search parties, hoping to bring at least one more child home.
You know, I've got 2 babies at home. It's the least I could do. You know, they're home safe, and there's people out there that they're missing their children or their family members, so I feel like it's the least I could do to help.
Dozens remain missing. Texas Governor Greg Abbott warned that more rounds of heavy rain are expected to last through Tuesday, potentially triggering further life-threatening floods in already saturated areas. The U.S. National Weather Service has extended a flood watch across much of south-central Texas, forecasting several more inches of rainfall in the coming days. On Sunday, U.S. President Donald Trump stated that he had approved a major disaster declaration, granting first responders access to essential resources for ongoing search and recovery operations. He acknowledged the devastating toll on families, calling it an unimaginable tragedy with numerous lives lost, and pledged that his administration would closely coordinate with state and local officials. Hyunyeong, Arirang News.
Over in Qatar, truce talks between Israel and Hamas conducted indirectly through mediators ended with little progress this past weekend ahead of a meeting on this Monday between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his U.S. host Donald Trump at the White House. Our Shin Se-byuk has more.
The first round of ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, which opened on Saturday in Doha, has ended without a breakthrough. According to reports from Reuters and AFP, the delegations from both sides engaged in indirect negotiations facilitated by mediators. A Palestinian official told AFP the talks focused on a ceasefire framework and a possible hostage prisoner exchange. But no progress was made in the first meeting. Reuters also cited several Palestinian sources who said the initial round concluded early Sunday morning. They claimed the Israeli delegation lacked the authority to reach a deal. Meanwhile, ahead of his scheduled meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Monday, President Trump expressed optimism about a possible breakthrough between Israel and Hamas.
I think there's a good chance we have a deal with Hamas during the coming week.
Netanyahu also voiced confidence that his talks with a U.S. leader would significantly contribute to progress in the negotiations.
I believe that the conversation with President Trump can definitely help advance this outcome.
Ahead of the negotiations, Hamas had reportedly proposed a revised truce plan. It includes a 60-day ceasefire and the return of more than 10 living Israeli hostages and the bodies of several others in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Hamas also demanded Israeli troops pull back to pre-March positions when earlier talks collapsed. Other conditions include restarting UN-led humanitarian operations in Gaza and reopening the Rafah border with Egypt for medical evacuations. However, Israel rejected the proposal, calling it unacceptable. Despite diplomatic efforts, violence continued on the ground on Sunday. An Israeli airstrike targeting a residential area in northern Gaza before dawn killed 10 people. In total, Gaza's civil defense said 26 Palestinians were killed in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip on Sunday alone. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung and Prime Minister Kim In-seok held a lunch meeting on this Monday that they plan to do every Monday behind closed doors. According to Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho, the meeting touched upon the Prime Minister's key duties such as following, that is, up on policy agenda, identifying long-term policy issues and resolving social dispute with the focus on public well-being. On pending matters, Prime Minister Kim shared intentions to sit down with medical students and trainee doctors about their potential return to their respective posts. President Lee, for his part, reportedly urged him to play an active role in resolving the matter. Also, earlier today, President Lee Jae-myung sat down with Cardinal Lazaro Yuhung-sik, the Vatican's Minister of Clergy, at the top office in Yongsan, where they addressed cooperation between South Korea and the Vatican for peace on the peninsula.
그리고 대한민국의 평화와 또 한반도의 안정 이런 문제에 대해서 어쨌든 전주교회 각별한 관심을 많이 갖고 계신데 어쨌든 그 이전이라도 우리 남북 관계 개선에 우리 교황청이 좀 각별한 기여를 역할을 해주시면 좋겠다는 말씀드립니다.
Pope Leo is scheduled to visit Seoul in 2027 to attend World Youth Day, and during this upcoming occasion, President Lee shared hopes for the Pope to visit North Korea. The cardinal, for his part, voiced hopes of seeing the South Korean leader posing for a photo with North Korea's Kim Jong-un should such an occasion arise. Cardinal Yu also extended the Pope's invitation to the president for a visit to Rome. President Lee further thanked the Catholic Church for its role in restoring South Korea's democracy. And South Korea will repatriate 6 North Korean fishermen who were rescued after drifting across the maritime border earlier this year. In fact, their journey back home may take place as early as this week. According to the Unification Ministry spokesperson Koo Byung-sam on this Monday, all 6 individuals have expressed a strong desire to return home, but their return was delayed as North Korea failed to respond to multiple related notifications sent by South Korea via a military hotline. And now authorities here have decided to proceed with their repatriation regardless of Pyongyang's silence. The fishermen were rescued in March and May in the West and East Seas, respectively. In other news, the Greater Seoul region is being bombarded by black bugs known as Lovebugs yet again this summer, but this time their pesky presence appears more prevalent. Our Park Hyo-bin files this report.
Hiking trails covered with black bugs. At the top of the mountain trail, bags filled with dead bugs are stacked one after another. They're called Lovebugs, and they've been appearing in massive numbers across South Korea's capital region every summer in recent years. But many say they've never seen this many before.
They stick to everything. Even if you try to fan them away, they don't come off easily. There were just so many. I literally couldn't walk around without doing this. This year has been just unbelievable.
Here I'm standing on Gyeongsan Mountain, and as you can see, there are Lovebugs all over my clothes. And over here, these are their dead bodies.
There are several theories behind the surge, but experts point to climate change as a key factor.
Although it's monsoon season, we've had little rain this year, which is a possible sign of climate change. Typhoons have missed Korea and brought heavy rainfall to southwestern China, causing years of flooding there. That may have driven the bugs to migrate naturally into Korea.
Though they cause some discomfort, Lovebugs are actually considered beneficial insects, making aggressive extermination efforts difficult to justify.
Lovebugs actually play a beneficial role in the ecosystem by serving as food for other species and helping decompose organic matter. They don't bite or spread disease, but when they appear in large numbers like this, people tend to see them as pests.
Instead of using chemical pesticides, local governments are turning to eco-friendly control methods. Some municipalities are using LED lights to lure the bugs away from populated areas, while others deploy fire trucks to spray water and kill them. Authorities are also collecting the insects by hand and using sticky traps to reduce their numbers. Experts say the bugs tend to swarm most intensely until mid-July, after which their numbers decline. But they also warn that these seasonal invasions are likely to continue.
Given recent climate patterns, these outbreaks are very likely to continue. The areas where Lovebugs appear may shift, but the phenomenon itself is expected to persist for the time being.
as lovebugs return each year in greater numbers, balancing ecological value with public discomfort is becoming a growing challenge for local governments and residents alike. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
And the soundtrack for Netflix's animation K-pop Demon Hunters has soared 5 spots to 3rd place on the Billboard 200 chart. According to Billboard, the animation's album currently stands as the top charting soundtrack of the year thus far. It is also the highest charting animated film soundtrack since Encanto, which spent 9 weeks at #1 back in 2022.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Leaders of the 10-member BRICS group gathered in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday for the bloc's 17th summit under the slogan Strengthening Global South Cooperation for More Inclusive and Sustainable Governance. Leaders from Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and newer members such as Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, UAE, and Ethiopia gathered for the 2-day summit. Despite the absence of Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who attended virtually, BRICS leaders achieved a rare consensus, approving a 31-page declaration. Key points included criticizing indiscriminate U.S. tariff hikes and condemning increased NATO defense spending. Host President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged the bloc to act as defenders of multilateralism. BRICS nations represent more than half the world's population and 40% of its economic output. The gathering comes amid growing calls for a united front to counterbalance the U.S.-led G7. Tesla and SpaceX founder Elon Musk has announced the formation of the America Party, marking a further break from former ally U.S. President Donald Trump. Musk made the announcement on social media on Saturday after posting a poll that showed 2-to-1 support from 1.2 million respondents. He pledged to oppose Trump-supported legislation and shake up U.S. politics ahead of 2026. Musk branded the current political system a one-party structure and not a democracy, and vowed to give people back their freedom, as well as showing his outrage over what Trump called his big beautiful bill that Musk said would bankrupt the country. Trump on Sunday called Musk's plans ridiculous, but said that Musk can have fun with it. Musk was once a major Trump campaign financier and head of the Department of Government Efficiency. Pope Leo XIV arrived at his summer residence in Castel Gandolfo on Sunday, the first time in 12 years that a pope has used a summer retreat. The Pope will spend 2 weeks from July 6th to 20th at the Villa Balberini on the edge of Lake Albano. Before leaving the Vatican, the pontiff said during his Sunday prayer, "I hope everyone can have some vacation time to restore the body and spirit." The stay at Castel Gandolfo is a change from the late Pope Francis, who stayed in the Vatican during the summer. Legendary artist and Black Sabbath frontman Ozzy Osbourne delivered his final live performance on Saturday in Birmingham, England, under the title Back to the Beginning. Seated on a symbolic bat-themed throne due to his Parkinson's and spinal issues, the 76-year-old singer launched into his solo hits before being joined by Black Sabbath's original lineup. The 11-hour event also included performances from other rock legends such as Metallica and Guns N' Roses. The massive event drew 40,000 fans to the concert at Villa Park and over 5.8 million viewers via global livestream. 3 charities are set to receive proceeds from the event, including Cure Parkinson's. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
A heatwave warning has been issued for Seoul starting from 10 a.m. today. It was the first heatwave warning in Seoul this year and comes a week after the heatwave advisory was issued on Monday last week. It is 18 days earlier than last year. Under heat waves everywhere, the daytime temperatures will rise to 36 degrees Celsius tomorrow and Wednesday, and it will feel hotter than 35 degrees. In particular, the feels-like temperature is expected to reach 29 degrees Celsius in the Seoul metropolitan area tonight, which is almost considered a supertropical night. Tomorrow morning, we'll start off at 27 degrees in Seoul, 26 degrees in Daejeon and Gwangju. Daily highs will move up to 34 degrees in Daegu, 33 degrees in Gyeongju. Heat waves during the day and tropical nights at night will continue for the time being. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub connecting Asia-Pacific. Busan, the largest maritime city, centering around maritime trade and the logistics industry. And Gyeongju, the city hosting the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, where 2,000 years of profound history and modern, trendy, and youthful energy blend in a perfect balance. Here, a new chapter of economic exchanges will unfold for a better future.
From breaking news in South Korea to stories from around the world, we're here to bring you the news that matters.
Truth, clarity, and impartiality. That's what we uphold in a fast-changing world.
We go beyond the headlines, offering depth, context, and perspective.
This isn't just news, it's our commitment. News you trust. Arirang News.
The Korean wave is drawing more fans from all
all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million using this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
Bread and butter issues on the national front and U.S. tariffs on the international front are some of the pending priorities for the one-month-old Lee Jae-myung administration. So where do we stand on these matters? We have answers on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Monday, July 7th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. President Lee Jae-myung has ushered in his second month at the top office, and in our panel session today, we touch upon the tasks that have been undertaken and those that remain to be tackled. For this, I have Stephen Borwick with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, hope you had a good weekend.
Yes, good to be here.
Right. I also have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA in the studio with us. Fabian, as always, it's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stephen, we will start with you. So President Lee Jae-myung recently held a press conference to mark his first full month at the top office. What are some of the early actions taken by the president after his inauguration, of course, that caught your attention?
Sure. I would point to a few things. I would say, one, he seems to have quite expeditiously and quite decisively filled a lot of key posts in his government. Like he appointed the ministers to lead key bodies like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Education, all the other kind of high-profile government bodies. One thing that I noticed was that he had committed to, I think he said his goal was to fill 30% of the positions with women, which is kind of an interesting thing in this country where we typically see women underrepresented in major government and private sector positions. He's moved forward pretty quickly with this, as we've discussed, this extra budget that's meant to stimulate the economy. I think he got South Korea's foreign affairs on pretty firm footing, where he established contact very quickly with the leaders of major countries like the U.S., China, Japan, Southeast Asian countries, and a number of others. So pretty much all of the assessments that I've seen of his tenure so far have been quite positive. I spoke with one expert when I was reporting on the press conference last week who told me that in his view, it was quite impressive that Lee had been able to do all of this right out of the gate when he didn't have what presidents normally have, like a transition period. Like normally when a president gets elected, there's like this couple month layover between when they actually take office. And in that time, they're able to work with a team and put plans together for how they will behave and how they will execute policy once they get into office. Lee didn't have any of that, but in his first month in office, he's been quite nimble, and he's gotten a bunch of things on the go. To attempt to explain that, I think we would just need to look at Lee's background, and we'd have to just point out that, like, Lee knows how to be a politician in this country. He's held leadership position. He was mayor of Seongnam, like a fairly large satellite city of Seoul, and then he was governor of Gyeonggi province, which is if I'm not mistaken, the most populous municipality in the country, you know, a very big and a very economically important part of the country. So I think he knows how to run a government institution, and I think he's quite personally adept at, you know, dealing with people and managing relationships. He's appointed a lot of people with interesting backgrounds and people with real expertise to some positions of real importance when it comes to the challenges that Korea is facing. And so, and he's being, at least so far, he's being rewarded in the polls. I think he's polling at something kind of like mid-60s level approval rating, 64%, I think is the last number that I saw. And so it seems like it's just in my own assessment, I would say that he's focusing his energy on things that there's quite a lot of consensus in Korean society that are desirable. There's a lot of consensus in Korean society that this country needs to have productive partnerships with lots of countries. There's a lot of consensus that the government ought to play an active role in stimulating the economy and ought to direct state funds to areas of need and areas that can contribute to the economic prosperity in the future. And so Lee, I think, has been quite prudent in that regard so far.
Right. And Fabio, what are some of your takeaways with regard to the Lee Jae-myung administration's first 30 days at the top office?
Well, what Stephen said was very holistic and comprehensive. I have a few things to add. I mean, I was actually surprised when I saw that Lee Jae-myung's popularity is so high. I mean, after 30 days in office, it's over 60%. And I think one reason is that his style of communication is quite refreshing, I would say. He comes off as rather down to earth, like close to the people, and yeah, he held like several town hall meetings. He gave a press conference, and I think that, you know, was well received by the public. He, maybe to mention one economic policy, he wants to regulate the real estate market, and that has been a big debate actually for at least 1 or maybe even 2 decades. I mean, there's concern that there might be a speculation bubble, and you know, a lot of Koreans park their savings in the real estate market. The prices have skyrocketed, and Lee Jae-myung wants to regulate it, make it harder to buy homes, or basically give incentives to invest your money also in, for example, the stock market. Yeah, in terms of foreign policy, he definitely wants to dodge the conflict or the geopolitical conflict between China and the US, and you know, not wanting to choose sides. Let's see if that will work or not. Maybe let's point out also one controversy that he had, a negative point, and that is basically his new prime minister. There was some scandal also about his university degree and some issues, and I think that has not been well received by the public. Why? Because Lee Jae-myung was criticizing the former president when he nominated his prime minister for similar reasons, and basically it is seen as a double standard. Okay, if the right-wing party does it, then it's a scandal, but if we do it, then it's okay. And I think that is one of the negative things so far of his last 30 days.
Right, and moving forward, Stephen, as you mentioned earlier, the first supplementary budget under the Lee Jae-myung administration passed the parliament last week. Now, it is the first under the Lee Jae-myung administration, but for South Korea, it's the second one this year. Could you tell us a bit about this extra budget and its intentions?
I think the overall intention is to stimulate the economy. Some of the funding is directed to vulnerable sectors like the construction sector and independent businesses who are having a pretty tough time. But the most kind of headline-grabbing aspect of it, I think, is that a big part of it is these. It's not cash. My understanding is that's not that people will just get an infusion into their bank account. It's these kind of vouchers that the state will dispense to people all over the country according to income level. I think every citizen will be entitled to somewhere between 150,000 won and 500,000 won. And there's a few variables. Different people, I think if you live in Seoul, because prices are higher here, you are entitled to a little bit of a boost. Or if you are in certain areas of particular need outside of the country, you are entitled to a little bit more. And these are usable at, I think, kind of smaller businesses, places that don't have I think there's a cap on like their annual revenue or their annual turnover. You're not eligible to be used at like big box retailers or anything like that. The idea is to encourage people to spend their money at their local restaurant, at their local Xijang or traditional market, or places like that. Places that I think, given the way that the economy is changing, are having a little bit of a harder time competing. These are not to further prop up the massive companies that are already bringing in a lot of the spoils from the economy. It's to kind of help out the little guy. And I mean, for me, like somebody who's been to a lot of different cities, a lot of kind of struggling industrial cities around the country, I'm well aware that like this is a model that has been used all over the country for a very long time. It's quite common for the municipal government in a particular city to allocate a certain amount of their budget to these vouchers and distribute them around among the citizenry with the hope that people will spend and stimulate kind of a street level economic consumption. The last thing I'll add is that as someone here on a marriage visa, I'm glad to see that it looks as though I will be eligible, and I look forward to spending this at my local grocery store, my local barbecue restaurant, or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
Got to play my part.
I mean, this extra budget, it also boosts investment for artificial intelligence here in South Korea. What has been shared about the Lee Jae-myung administration's policy on AI?
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting because he has a rather bold vision for the future of South Korea. And promoting AI, I mean, if you look at what he's already done, he has appointed a former chief of tech company Naver, who's become a presidential AI advisor, which is a new post and kind of interesting. Then the new science minister comes from LG, and he has developed like the language, like an AI model for LG. And also there's of course a lot of real money investment into AI. And what Lee Jae-myung wants to achieve is he wants to create a sovereign AI infrastructure. And that is interesting because actually, not many countries have the incentive to even attempt so, because you already have two giants like the US and China who are quite advanced when it comes to AI. So why does Lee Jae-myung want to compete with those two giants? I think in his logic, of course, we have geopolitical tensions between those two powers, and there's a lot of like middle powers who might be concerned that one nation is dominating the AI sector, and for them, I think it would be very attractive if actually South Korea goes a third way, if there's a third player in this industry. And of course, South Korea can do it. It has the digital infrastructure, it has the talent, and I mean the engineers and IT personnel. And so let's see if it works out. But it is a risky approach because it will cost a lot of money. The success is not certain, and we know that both China and the US, they see AI as basically national security interest. It's a core interest for them, and if you have a third player competing, they might act very territorial and might not be happy about it.
Right. And beyond AI, Stephen, you also covered the president's recent acknowledgement about a tariff deal with the US being slightly difficult. Now, his top trade negotiator is currently in the US for talks with his counterpart there. What's the latest on that front, the tariff deal between South Korea and the US?
Well, it seems as though the Lee administration is being a little bit cautious in just how they talk about it. I mean, that was a point in Lee's press conference last week that I thought was noteworthy, that when he was asked about that, his demeanor changed a little bit. He became a little bit quieter, and he said something to the effect of, even if I talk about this now, it can affect how things play out. So like it's kind of difficult for me to speak about this in a high-profile setting like that. And I think that testified to, I mean, the sensitivity of this issue and just the seriousness with which Seoul is taking this, because there's a lot riding on this. So I'm sure that Seoul is, I mean, Sunny, as you mentioned, there's a top trade negotiator in Washington now, and that is just the latest of, I don't know exactly how many delegations have gone there and attempted to engage with their US counterparts. And there's, I mean, I'm sure whatever Seoul can be doing behind the scenes, they are doing, and they are endeavoring to find areas of common interest, and they are drawing on this long history of alliance that South Korea has with the US. But I mean, we can't be able to know exactly what's happening or what the prospects are. I mean, it's another thing that we probably ought to flag is that Lee himself has not managed to secure an in-person meeting with U.S. President Trump, as I have to assume that he would like to, because Lee is also a kind of adept political operator. He knows how to communicate his position effectively. A number of analysts have speculated that Lee and Trump might have a kind of personal chemistry that they could perhaps draw on. They both have kind of unconventional backgrounds. They've both survived assassination attempts. And just, I mean, in business and in life, it's always easier to reach an agreement with somebody when you're in the same room as them. So I'm sure that's something that Lee's team is quite keen to have happen as soon as possible. But the time is ticking down, and we don't have any definitive sense as to whether or not there'll be an agreement. But we will definitely all be watching closely.
Right, for sure. And Fabian, talking about tariffs, would be going beyond the borders here. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has called for a quick deal between the EU and the US with regard to tariffs. Could you tell us a bit about his comments and concerns?
Yeah, I mean, the quote is basically, he said, a quick result must be reached, better quick and simple than lengthy and complicated and still under negotiation for months. That makes sense, and I mean, clearly he has the German economy in mind. The situation, for example, in Germany is that we had a recession basically for a couple of years, which is unprecedented, at least for the last decades. And just now, when we had some positive momentum again, then Trump came and threatened tariffs. And, you know, the German economic model relied on Russian cheap energy, which, of course, after the war in Ukraine is not possible anymore. And it relied on the access to the Chinese market, which also has not gone well in the recent 2 or 3 years. So the US has become ever more important, the market in the US, and especially for the car industry, which is very important for the German economy. And cars are parts, I mean, when you build a car, the single parts, they get shipped from to several countries. So tariffs is really deadly for this industry. That means the German chancellor is really under pressure to find a quick solution. However, so far, countries who have reached a quick deal with Trump, the UK, for example, some experts are noting that actually their solution was not so great, so maybe it is even better to wait a little bit and try to find a good deal instead of just trying to find a deal under any cost. And also there's another domestic dimension of it. I mean, in Germany now there's really almost hatred against Trump. I mean, he's really an unpopular, hugely unpopular US president, so some people don't want a chancellor that is too submissive towards the US. So I think Merz should also be listening to his, basically to his voters.
Right. And for the sake of greater comparison, Stephen, what can you tell us briefly with regard to Japan's tariff negotiation with the US?
It's definitely an interesting case in that Japan is also facing a kind of potentially desperate situation where they are in line to have 9% tariffs go back up to 24% on July 9th. So there's a lot at stake there too, particularly as in the case with Germany, as it pertains to the very pivotal auto industry. But Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba has, I think, taken a kind of more confrontational or less appeasement-minded approach than I think maybe some people expected him to, because he's quite, he's a bit vulnerable domestically in terms of Japanese politics. Is a kind of inherently sort of unstable system where there's a kind of a quick turnover of prime ministers there. But I would point to a few kind of potential explanations for that. And I'm not an expert on Japanese politics by any means, but former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was in power during Trump's term, got a lot of international attention for his supposed personal rapport with Trump. They bonded over golf and whatever else. And a lot of people kind of assessed Abe as having been kind of politically prudent or politically clever and kind of playing on his personal affinity with Trump and developing this relationship. But I think in hindsight, a lot of the domestic media in Japan is sort of reached the conclusion that Japan really didn't get much out of that if Trump is now coming back and making these quite harsh demands. So I think there's a fair bit of domestic consensus that those sort of flattery and appeasement measures are not wise. So that's one thing. And just the other thing, and this is just my personal take, is I think in this part of the world, in Japan, in South Korea, people tend to have a much longer term perspective than Westerners do. Westerners tend to be, and I say this as a Westerner myself, kind of impatient and kind of seeking quick answers and quick moves. People in this part of the world tend to be kind of more historically minded and be a little bit more patient. So I have to wonder if maybe in Japan, sort of what they're thinking is that no U.S. president is here forever. So it does not make sense to rush into a drastic deal where Japan would be giving up a lot when it comes to something as important as its auto industry or some other very important part of its economy. I think they are just kind of playing the long game and seeking a good deal and not just a quick deal for the sake of a deal. And I think that domestically that's probably playing pretty well with the Japanese public.
Right. Meanwhile, back here in South Korea, Fabian, President Lee Jae-myung, as you mentioned earlier, has also been seeking to actively engage with members of the public here. He's held 2 town hall meetings, the first one being in Gwangju last month, and a more recent second one in Daejeon last week. What are your thoughts, Fabian, with regard to his efforts to engage with the public directly?
Yeah, I think it's quite remarkable. Usually communication with politicians tends to be rather formal, and the town hall, I think, is a concept that is not so usual. I mean, in the US, for example, you have a lot of politicians who are also very good entertainers and like this casual form of communicating with the public. Here in South Korea, this is rather something new. And I would say the good things is that he allowed questions that were non-scripted. I think that's the most important stuff, because if you basically have a town hall meeting where you have to hand in your question and everything is prepared, then it basically contradicts the purpose of it. So he did that, and he also allowed people in on a first-come, first-served basis, which means there was no pre-selective method. And that has advantages because it's basically free for anyone to apply to enter those town hall meetings. But it has one disadvantage. In the end, the town hall meetings ended up a little bit like a complaint service. People would always voice their individual agenda, and then, so I think it was a little bit tiring to watch in the end. But I think the efforts in general were positive, and I think, unscripted communication and getting the president to ask the questions that you want to get answered, that is, I think, a positive thing.
Right, which is what quite a number of pundits have been saying as well. All right, Fabian, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Stephen, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we say goodbye today. Thank you for watching, and see you same time tomorrow.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be